My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
Good afternoon and welcome to Dublin City FM on this miserable Monday afternoon. And today I want to say a special hello to all our friends out there in Phoenix FM as well, because today my guest is somebody who's going to be quite familiar to the staff and listeners out there. Byrne. Derek, welcome to LGBTQlife.
Thank you very much, Mick.
Derek, just on that one, you were the former manager out there in Phoenix.
I was up until about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
I spent 3 years with Phoenix FM, bringing the station forward. We had a wonderful time there, actually. By the time I left, the station was running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with a strong team and a wonderful bunch of staff and volunteers. And of course, we all know that community radio relies on its volunteers.
Absolutely, 100%, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, we had over 70 when I was there, and all very dedicated people, all very talented and very well trained on all aspects of radio, and some of them were actually doing degree courses, and some of them went on to work in mainstream radio and media as well. Very proud of them all. They were great.
Yeah, it mainly broadcast to the Blanchardstown area. Is that right, or did it go?
It's Dublin 15, so it would encompass Blanchardstown, Castleknock, Mulhuddard, Clonsilla, that whole area. One of the largest areas in the country in terms of voter numbers, but also the most diverse part of Dublin City. So yeah, very interesting. That of course meant that we had to develop programs that reflected that diversity, and we had an LGBT show as well.
Richie Keane doing that, wasn't
We
he?
had for a while. It was mainly Annie Bowles who
Okay.
was the presenter of that for over a year. Richie came in after Annie.
Okay. Yeah.
But a wonderful show, very funny. We used to record it on Friday afternoons, and it was a great way to end the week.
Yeah. No, we would never think we could. We wouldn't try to compete, and we could never think of superseding. But this, I gather, is going out now. We go out there on Thursday on a Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. in Phoenix. So we're very proud of that.
It's something that we always did at Phoenix. We would take programs from other community radio stations, because we always felt that it was important to look at what was available, particularly when you have a large schedule to fill.
Absolutely.
You look at what's going on elsewhere because it's relevant. And we shouldn't look at reinventing the wheel anyway. I mean, your show is amazing, so why not share it?
Yeah. How important then, just on the philosophic aspect of it, there's not too many LGBT programs on certainly on community radio and even on mainstream radio anymore. How important do you think it is to have that voice out there, particularly the community talking to its own people?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people don't realise that I had the first LGBT program on mainstream radio back in 2005 on 98 FM. We had In the Pink, which was produced in conjunction with Free Magazine that I was working on at the time, and the producers at 98 FM were very good. I had been brought in to maybe do some snippets on the late night talk show, and after a while they said, well, look, why don't you have your own program? So every Tuesday night for half an hour we had the LGBT show, In the Pink. And I think it's really important that we discuss LGBT issues in mainstream media, because it's also a way of, for me, it's, I remember what it was like for me growing up in Ireland in the 70s and 80s, where I actually thought I was the only gay person in the country for a while. But it would have been lovely to be able to turn on a radio and hear somebody that I could connect to, discussing issues that I could relate to and giving me information that I needed. So I think it's very important we have that.
Where did you grow up, as a matter of interest, Eric?
I grew up on the north side of Dublin. I went to school at the Ballymun Comprehensive.
Well,
And a big shout out to the comp.
Yeah.
And I grew up in my, as they say, my formative years were spent growing up in Finglas.
Okay.
And then I moved, when I left home, I moved to Rathgar, where I lived on Kenilworth Square.
Fabulous
And,
place there.
yeah, I lived in a flat there for
Not
nearly
with Tony
20
Walsh.
years. No, but around the corner from Tony Walsh's house. And I went to lots of those parties in Tony Walsh's house.
Yeah.
They were amazing.
Yeah.
But now I live on just off Cork Street.
Okay.
So I'm a townie now.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting you could say that, because I was with Near FM for over 10 years, and then I started doing LGBT, not programs, but items for different programs I was doing, and then we took it on board to distribute GCN out there as well, because I always said it's probably easy enough to be LGBT in Rathmines or Rathgar, but it's a different matter in, say, Finglas or Ballymun or Coolock. Certainly in the first decade of the.
Well, I have to say, I came out in 1982 when I was at school.
Oh,
in
that's
fifth year.
very brave.
In fact, I came out during a debate at Trinity College. The motion was there is no liberty without unless there's a liberty with order, and I spoke about homosexuality, abortion, divorce. And I came out. I ended up winning Best Speaker that night.
Well
but
done.
the funny thing is, Mick, what happened was, I mean, at the comp, I would have got a bit of a ribbing, a bit of name calling. You had to kind of learn to stand up for yourself. Once I came out publicly, I became the most popular guy in school.
That's really
Everyone wanted
interesting,
to be my friend. Everybody supported me. It was like a complete 180 turnaround. And from that, I think I've learned the power of authenticity, the power of being yourself, and the power of not being afraid to be yourself. And I think that's always driven me, that experience, being honest with people.
No, now I'm a generation before you, because I finished in 1969, so I'm showing my age here. And I've said this to people, that when I was at school, I would have said there was nobody in the same class as me that would have identified as LGBT. I mean, for a whole variety of reasons. And I've also said, back in those days, there were no gay people, there were just queers. And that was the way society reflected it. So for you to come out in that early stage is, all I can say is respect.
Well, the thing is as well, at 17, I didn't fully understand what it meant. I didn't know there were any organisations.
Well, to see, really, was there?
Well, I didn't. Well, there was, but I certainly
bit,
didn't know about it. Not at 17. And I also kind of felt that while I knew that I was gay, I kind of felt that, well, as long as I'm not sexually active, it doesn't matter. So, you always find a way of justifying it in your head. Like some people who are gay will say, first of all, that they're bisexual until they can come to terms
like
with
Elton John.
Well, bi now, gay later. But and I think also to it was a very different time. Very, very different times.
Well,
but
it was illegal for a start, wasn't it?
Well, the Homosexual Act was illegal. I don't think I knew that at the time. I don't think I connected with that. But the difficulty came when I went to work. That was the thing, particularly because the mid-80s was the period when HIV and AIDS started to raise its ugly head, and there was a lot of fear, and there was an assumption that if you were gay, you had AIDS. So, at work I had a bit of a hard time, and I had to learn to cope with that. But again, I got great support through my workmates and through my trade union, who were fantastic. And also through what was the NGF at that time, the National Gay Federation. It's now the
NXF,
whatever. But they were fantastic and very supportive. But back in those days, just being gay and being openly gay was a political act in itself, and I was one of the leaders in the gay youth group at the time, and we used to write letters into the newspapers who wouldn't print them because there was no age of consent. So the very fact that we existed was a major political act, and I think that's where my political activism began, really.
Yeah. So, in terms of socialising, and we'll talk about after you went to school, after you left school, and things like that. Now, when I was say 19, 20 or thereabouts, there were basically two gay bars that people knew about. They were called queer bars. Let's be blunt about it. There was Bartley Don's, and there was Davy Byrne's to a lesser degree. Now, Bartley Don's was it was more one-stop shop sort of thing, whereas Davy Byrne's was. You had to be rich to go in there.
Was the Bailey not?
No, the Bailey. The Bailey was taken over by hippies. So you basically went into the Bailey to score for a different reason than you might have gone into Bartley Don's. Yeah. So it was quite a different environment then. But they were the only two places. I can remember. One of my memories is that in Trinity in about 1970, 71 or thereabouts. Being a communist was the trendy thing, and I remember on May Day, people were going around calling each other comrade, and we thought, oh, this is a bit dull. So we went around calling each other petal, instead of so ever since then, whenever you see me, I call people petal, and they know where it's coming from now. But
it might catch on again.
But well, as I say, everybody knows me now. That's my greeting to everybody. It's almost how can I put it? It's deflating in that sense of the word, but. Well, I remember we went up to Bartley Don's, one afternoon. We were going to go up there and, basically show solidarity.
I remember
and
Bartley's.
It was a dark place, and it was a sad place in many respects. Now, I think
you had the booths, and I think that didn't help.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't a lot of people there then, and they all, you went in there and they all loved. But it's come on enormously since then, hasn't it? In terms of the confidence of the not only of the individuals but of the community.
Yeah, well, I came out in '85 where the big bar was the Viking at the time, which is next door to the Olympia.
Okay.
And then you had, the George was open, but only the kind of unofficially the kind of downstairs place, which is the bar now, which is known as Jurassic Park. That's where all the dinosaurs go. I find myself there quite often, but I was that opening night of the George when it was officially opened as a gay bar in May 1985. The upstairs bit where you put your coat now, that was it. It was known as the loft. And it was painted. There was a mural all over it, like you were in a machine or something. We used to call it the hairdresser's brain. But I've seen huge changes since then. But one of my criticisms, Mick, would be that you go to a gay bar now, and while it's, it is good that we have a sense of openness, but I know a lot of gay men my age feel uncomfortable with young girls, for example, socialising around you. Just kids. There isn't a sense of, a bar you can go to that's a gay bar, people your own age, where you can feel comfortable. And I think we've lost that element of safety. And also to remember, one of the things about a gay bar in the early days was that some people were not out. And there are still people who are not out, maybe even people who are married.
Absolutely.
Who are afraid to go to a gay bar now because they could be seen by somebody who knows them. So we have missed something in the growth. And I think that there's room for both, but maybe we need to provide venues certainly for older gay men and women where they can feel that they are socializing with like-minded people. I was in Jurassic Park on Saturday night, and a group of girls came in who were obviously on a hen's party. It just makes you feel like you're a bit of a sideshow.
You do. I agree with you. No, it's funny you should mention that, because I came back from Sydney in about 1994, 95, and then we discovered the gag ball. I don't know if you ever met.
I was living in London.
Okay, and I still say that was the most fabulous place I ever went to in Dublin. That's where I met Panty and all of those. But it was only people who knew what was going on and wanted to go to that, and then it got closed down, which I won't go into the story of that. And they moved it up to the Pod up in Harcourt Street, and we thought, well, we've been going there.
I used to go to it there.
And I went up there, and the first time we went there, and it was okay, but it wasn't as exclusive as it was. And we came outside, we were waiting for a cab, and these, like you say, these little girls came out, and one was on the phone to her mate, and she said, it's fucking great in there. There's all these lesos and queers, and we were dancing with them. We never went back again, and I thought, Yeah, we've lost something in that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
But what do you make of it now? I mean, to be gay now is unusual because most people are either polyamorous or pansexual or bisexual or this, that, and the other.
Actually, I think it's difficult for young people
Yeah.
now because this, growing up is confusing enough as it is.
Indeed,
you
isn't
know,
it?
like
Yeah.
at least when I was a teenager, you're either gay or you're straight.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
there's all sorts of different
Alphabet-
variations on a theme.
Alphabet soup. isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reality is that depression, self-harming, suicide, drug abuse, alcoholism are still way higher in the LGBT community than they are in mainstream community. And I would put that down to the fact that while we of course have much greater equality and acceptance and understanding, I think you cannot forget the fact that if people are growing up LGBT, they go through an awful lot mentally.
Sure.
Coming to terms with their situation. And I actually I've written about this in the Irish Times that I think we need to keep an eye on the mental well-being of young people in general, but in particular LGBT young people.
Okay. When you went to Trinity, how did you find it? I mean,
It's at the end of Dame Street.
Did you go from school to Trinity, or what was the
No,
situation?
I believe it or not,
Were you a
I
mature
studied
student?
at. There are those who think I'll never be mature. I studied drama first.
Okay.
And I studied at the College of Music, and
That was up off Chatham
it
Street.
was on Chatham Street at the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and also down off Harcourt Street as well. And then I went to live in London. I worked in the art world in London and Dublin, and then I got ill in my mid-20s. I had a tumour removed from the side of my behind my ear, and was out of action for a while, and that gave me time to rethink, and I decided to go back to university. I did a humanities degree at DCU with English as my main subject, and won a scholarship to Oxford University for
Well done
my,
again.
in my second year. Came back to DCU, finished my degree, and decided to do a master's at Trinity in ethnic and racial studies. So I did that, and from there went on to work with Dublin AIDS Alliance.
Okay.
Actually, well, it's now HIV Ireland. Worked with Dublin AIDS Alliance for a while, and through there got involved in the whole community and voluntary sector. Moved on into working with people with drug addiction. Went back to Trinity in 2006 and did an MSc in drug and alcohol policy.
Okay. Well,
That was a 2-year course, and I've been working with Maynooth University delivering their addiction studies program ever since, basically. Apart from the 3 years I took away from the sector, I've been managing a drug rehabilitation program in Ballyfermot. Working in the front line is very stressful. Decided to take a break away from it when the opportunity to work with Phoenix came up. Because I've been writing in the Irish Times, I've been doing the radio, ever since 2005, and it was an opportunity with Phoenix for me to blend the mixture of experience I had in terms of the work with people in addiction, the community development work I'd done, and the journalistic and broadcasting experience that I had. So it was kind of like a dream job for me. And about 18 months ago, took time out to go back to university. Went back to Trinity, did a postgraduate course in creative thinking, innovation and entrepreneurship. Wrote my first play, which was in the Dublin Fringe Festival last year, very successful, Shadows. And now I combine my work between Maynooth University and CAD, Community Awareness of Drugs, where I work with families and professionals, but mainly with families, helping them to develop a drug and alcohol strategy in their own home. Because I think parents are an underused resource in that regard. So, I had decided, if I may say, to run for the Senate about 4 years ago. So that's what I'm doing now. And hopefully I'll get support and get in.
Yeah. Just coming back to 2 points, Derek, that struck me. Now, I grew up here in the late 60s, early 70s, when, by and large, you were ostracised to a certain degree if you were seen to be taking drugs. It was very narrow. There wasn't a huge supply compared to now, and the papers were demonizing anybody who did. Then we leap forward to about another 15 years when HIV came in, and we again ostracized people, mainly because they were it was identified as a gay disease or a gay plague or whatever you want to call it. Looking at what we've got now, how important do you think it is that we look at these things rationally rather than we're still getting? If you look at today's and the papers and turn on the media, it's all emotion rather than science. I mean, how important do you think it is that we actually deal with this on a rational basis?
Well, I actually wrote an article. I contributed to the opinion page of the Irish Times, and I wrote a piece called "No Need for Moral Panic" was the headline, because of this very issue you're talking about. I feel that we've had 50 years of ineffective policy on drugs in this country, and we need to change. We need a more pragmatic approach that looks at how people actually live in addiction, live with drugs. I don't think our current national drug strategy does that enough. There certainly hasn't been much action on it, but I think that this notion of moral panic, where we frighten people into submission when it comes to difficult policies like needle exchange, or like the recent issues over at the safer injecting facilities, which are still having problems. My argument was, look, people are intelligent enough to take the truth on board. I don't think there's a family in this country that hasn't been affected by addiction in some way, shape or form. And I think people can deal with the truth. They don't need to be fed sensationalism. They don't need to engage in a moral panic situation where everybody's terrified that we're all going to die. Like, for example, the only reason we have needle exchange in Ireland was because in the 1980s we were told that the drug addicts were going to give us all AIDS. So give them the needles so that they wouldn't spread the virus amongst each other, and therefore wouldn't spread the virus amongst the general population. It was, we're all going to die. Give them the needles. And that sort of situation has been used with the safer injecting facilities as well. Stories in the tabloids about children getting needle stick injuries on buses, tourists looking at junkies, their word, not mine, shooting up in laneways off O'Connell Street and walking over discarded needles in parks. That's moral panic. Instead of telling people, well, look, if we can introduce safer injecting facilities for people addicted to drugs, it will encourage them into treatment. It stops the risk of overdose and reduces the transmission of bloodborne viruses.
Now, it's an interesting one you should say that, because again, I was in Australia in 1982 when AIDS or HIV came in. Very, very quickly, they were giving out free condoms left, right, and centre. They'd have them in the LGBT areas. They're giving out clean needles. And it seemed to me at the time they had worked on the basis that people will sin, and we're not going to make a moral judgment on that.
Absolutely.
We'll make it safe, and it took a long time for that one to come here. Just on this one, I don't want to labour the point too much, Derek. I say to people that we have to regulate drugs because, well, drugs are always regulated, and unfortunately, at the moment, they're being regulated by gangsters. That's the reality. Wouldn't it be better if we had official science and government regulation rather than allowing people who simply got a financial interest in regulating, because that's the reality.
I think, Mick, the thing is that the drug situation is very complex. I don't think there is going to be a one-size-fits-all solution.
Of course.
I think we've got to look at a number of models that are working. I would be in favour of decriminalisation. I think that it is working in Portugal, which is the model that we all know. But I'm also in favour of the Icelandic model, which is about working with young children from a very early age and creating healthy environments for people to grow up in. I think you've got to see, part of the problem is politicians will look for quick solutions, and they will look for sound bites, and they will look for something that works briefly. The reality is that these models that are working take a generation before you begin to see results. We need some long-term investment, a long-term approach, and I think a combination of factors. Education, for example, is very important. But
Yeah. Let's talk about Shannon issues, Derek. What would you like people, if people are looking at you, what would you like them to think about? How is this man going to progress issues? What's his insight? What's his what's his priorities if you were in that chamber?
Well, my priorities, I've got on my website, derekbyrne.ie/manifesto, I have a list of my 12 priorities, and we don't have time to go through them all, but I'd say, and we've just spoken about one of them, the pragmatic approach to drugs. One of the issues that's very important to me at the moment is, going on my own experience, is challenging the discrimination of people over 50 in the workplace. I think we need to embrace an intergenerational approach. We need to realise that older people can be creative, have a lot to bring to the workplace. I'm also in favour of staggering retirement. I was on the protest march against Stop 67 on Saturday that Reed Smith had organised. I think, though, that people should be allowed to retire between 65 and 75 in a way that suits them, a more user-friendly approach, that maybe someone can decide I want to work 3 days a week or 2 days a week. And that means that their know-how, their expertise is maintained, and that there is a slower changeover in the workplace. And I think that would benefit the individual, would benefit society, and would benefit commerce. I'm very much in favour of banning blood sports in Ireland. I think that's an important issue for me. Of course, the environment is important, but for me, it's about being authentic. As a politician, I think people are looking for change and a different approach from their politicians. When you look at the policies that I prioritise, they're issues that I've either written about, campaigned for, or feel very passionate about on a personal level. And I think that authenticity is very important, and that's what I bring to the table.
Okay. Is there a danger in the LGBT community of complacency that we got marriage equality, we got rid of the eighth, and somehow or other?
I was just talking about this on Saturday. It was like, where are the gay community? The gay community were supported with marriage equality and with other issues. We should be out there supporting society as well. And it disappoints me that the activists have gone away. I mean, for example, again, one of my issues is I think gay and bisexual men should be allowed to donate blood. I think it's ridiculous in this day and age with the tests we have, which are so sophisticated.
The science is there, isn't it?
There's no reason, there's absolutely no reason why gay and bisexual men shouldn't be allowed to donate their blood. That's something that I certainly will be pushing for. But the gay community, in my view, would have to criticise the fact that I think they should be out there supporting people. There should have been more of us out there on Saturday on that march in town.
Okay, last but by no means least, and I don't want to get too emotional about coronavirus here, but there's talk about getting, casting Paddy's Day parade. What about Pride?
Not having Pride because of the corona.
Yeah, now I know it's a few months down the track.
I don't think that the St. Patrick's Day parade should be cancelled, actually. Okay. I think it should go ahead. And the virus doesn't, medically, the virus doesn't like the wind, the cold. People really can just be sensible. I remember when the parade was cancelled during the foot and mouth crisis. I think it would be miserable. I know there's a public health concern, but no, I think it's gone too far.
Let's be adults.
Let's be adults, let's be sensible, and let's have our parties, please.
Derek Byrne, we could talk for the rest of the afternoon,
Absolutely.
but it has been an absolute delight to catch you up today, and we wish you all the very best come Shannon 2020. That's it for this week's LGBTQ Life. Catch us again on Saturday. I'm Mick Fitz. I'll be back in a week's time. You take care.
My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say